You're standing in front of someone you've met at least 3 or 4 times, and their name is just gone. Not even hovering at the tip of your tongue, but completely, cleanly absent. You start performing a desperate bit of improvised theater, angling your body and praying someone else says their name first so you don't have to admit the truth. You aren't rude, and you aren't careless. In fact, your brain might be failing you precisely because it's busy doing something much more meaningful. In the next few minutes, we're going to look at the Baker-Baker paradox to understand why high-empathy, associative brains are often the worst at remembering names. You'll learn why your mind treats a proper name like random data trash while perfectly cataloging a person's life story, their energy, and how they made you feel. By the end of this video, you will realize that your bad memory isn't a cognitive flaw. It's actually a byproduct of how your brain prioritizes human depth over labels. The foundation of this struggle is a phenomenon psychologists call the Baker-Baker paradox. In a classic 1987 study published in the British Journal of Psychology by researchers McWeeny, Young, and colleagues, this quirk of memory was put to the test. They showed 2 groups a photo of the same man. Group 1 was told his profession was a baker. Group 2 was told his last name was Baker. Days later, the people who learned the occupation remembered it significantly better than those who learned the name. This happens because the word baker as a job is semantically rich. It triggers a web of associations like the smell of fresh bread, the warmth of an oven, and a messy apron. A name, however, is an arbitrary label that connects to absolutely nothing. To your brain, the name James is just a sound, a seat number on a ticket. And your brain is an optimization machine built to throw away the ticket the second you enter the concert. You might think you're forgetting names because you aren't paying attention, but the reality is more ironic. You're paying too much attention to yourself. Psychologists call this the next-in-line effect. Because you care about making a good impression, your brain shifts into performance mode, internally narrating your own eye contact and handshake while the other person is speaking. You heard the name, but you never actually listened to it because you were too busy editing yourself in real time. High empathy people are particularly vulnerable to this because they are empathetically driven. While others are locking onto surface-level details like titles or names, your brain is scanning for deeper signals: eye contact, the exhaustion hiding behind a smile, or the feeling of safety in the way someone stands. You store the texture of the person, rather than the socially convenient sound they were assigned at birth. Your brain is likely highly associative, meaning it works through connection and narrative. Deep thinkers and creatives are disproportionately represented among chronic name forgetters because their memory works like a web. In this web, stories and emotions are the bridges, but names are isolated islands with no bridge in or out. An associative brain doesn't navigate islands well. It wants the story, not the nomenclature. There is also a biological gatekeeper at play: dopamine. When information is novel or emotionally charged, dopamine signals your brain to store it properly. Names in a first meeting rarely trigger this reward response because they lack sensory connection or survival value. However, if you connect that name to a vivid visual image or a story, the island suddenly gets a bridge and the dopamine gates open. If you find yourself constantly in a tip-of-the-tongue state, it's often because of social pressure. As your anxiety rises, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, which makes the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for retrieval, work less reliably. This biological block was perfectly captured in a landmark year 2000 study published in Nature Neuroscience by Dr. Dominique de Corvan and colleagues. They demonstrated that acute elevations of stress hormones like cortisol directly and significantly impair the brain's ability to retrieve declarative memories, such as a proper name. The harder you search for the name under pressure, the further it retreats, leaving you with a terrifying mental blank screen. Here's the reframe. A name is like a door, but the actual person, their soul, their story, their energy, is the house inside. In your excitement to explore the beauty of that house, your brain often drops the key right at the doorstep. Forgetting the label is often proof that you were too busy experiencing the human being to properly file the label. You didn't forget the performance. You just threw away the ticket because you were already moved by the music. If you've ever frozen in a moment where your brain completely wiped someone's name, leave a comment with the most embarrassing name you've ever forgotten. It's time to realize you aren't broken. You're just built for depth. Subscribe to join our neighborhood of amazing houses, where we occasionally drop our keys.